Welcome to Mindfork. So my friends and I have been playing Lethal Company quite a lot recently, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone since it's been on the scene for quite a while now. Since its release in October last year, it's blown up in popularity massively. Having a laugh or you hear one of your friends scream and then go silent, absolute 10 out of 10 moment. But the game itself feels pretty nostalgic to me specifically for one solid reason: the monsters you face. When I was still a mini Mindfork, still in school, I used to play in the computer science room with my friends at lunch. We'd boot up a game called SCP Containment Breach, and my friend would control the keyboard and I would control the mouse. Since most of you guys are around the same age as me, I expect you all to know it, or have heard of it at least. We never did manage to beat the game, but I was so obsessed with trying to survive that I remember writing a small notebook with tips on how to beat each SCP, and so, more recently I found myself doing a similar thing in Lethal Company. There's something pretty satisfying in figuring out how these creatures work, and then being able to maneuver yourself around them. Now, while I won't be doing that today, it might be a topic for a future video, I wanted to do something similar. So to that end, today we're going to ask which of the 19 monsters in Lethal Company is the most lethal. I'm sure we all have one in mind at the moment, so first we need to lay down some ground rules for a fair fight. First off, while you could use this list as a note of reference while you're playing, we're going to go for a more general idea of what makes a monster dangerous, comparing them to real life predators. Second point is that the idea of lethality is already super vague, since a lot of things can hunt in wildly different ways, but all still be considered similarly deadly. So we're going to simplify it down to 5 categories, and give them each a number grading system, so A, B, C, D, and F, and then the evergreen S tier for the massive step above. As for the categories, I chose them based on what I think makes a dangerous creature in real life. So let's go over them, shall we? The first is strength. A lethal creature to us is one that can overpower with ease. A good example would be a polar bear, superior to humans in strength bar none. You go up against one alone and you'll die. The second is speed, an example being a cheetah. Getting caught by it is practically a death sentence. The third is weaponry. Now this one is a little more on the nose, but it basically refers to any kind of skill, other than directly attacking us, that helps it kill us. An example is an anglerfish. Its bioluminescence helps it attract fish, so that it can feed, but the skill itself isn't necessarily dangerous. That's what we're going for. The fourth is aggression, how relentless it is. Human beings are probably one of the best examples, since we as a species have much higher endurance than most other animals. This means that even if a creature is faster than us, it'll get tired before we do, and if we keep chasing for long enough, it'll tire out, making it easier to catch in the long run. This is because we're able to regulate our body temperature by sweating and other mechanics, but we won't get too deep into that. Maybe a discussion for another day. And the final category is intelligence, how effective it is at outsmarting us. Another way to describe this would be its ability to trick or trap us, or really how easily it can just get to us. These 5 categories, strength, speed, weaponry, aggression, and intelligence, won't guarantee a lethal monster, but one that combines all of them together should theoretically be strong enough to kill most, if not all, people it encounters. So anything that ranks F or a D would be practically harmless, C's would be moderately dangerous, B's would be nothing to be trifled with, comparable to some sort of monster, and anything that gets an A would prove to be the most lethal company. Before we start, strap on your orange suit and grab a defensive shovel to whack that subscribe button. It helps a lot and lets me know what kinds of videos you all enjoy. Right off the bat, we'll be disqualifying roaming locusts and manticoils, since both those species don't actually attack the player. Fastest F grade I've ever seen, but should be the only ones in that range. As for the others, let's begin with strength, from the bottom up. The only D tier monster here is the Snareflea, since it takes quite a long time to kill you. I can see some people disagreeing with me on this one in terms of strength, but let me just reiterate. This only goes over how much damage it does at once. Right now, it doesn't matter that it's practically inescapable, we'll get into that point in another category, so D. Up from there, in the C tier, are the Hoarding Bug, the Hydra Deer, the Thumper, and the Circuit Bees. All of these monsters take a decent amount of time to kill you, more than 4 hits or so usually, so that's why they're here. Next are the B ranking, and funnily enough there are no monsters in this tier, so we move up to A. Here we have the Bunker Spider and the Baboon Hawks. Both take 2 hits to kill a player, so they're fairly strong. And finally we have S tier, where most of the monsters are. It's actually kind of concerning how many of them are capable of one-shotting the player. These include the Spore Lizards, the Eyeless Dogs, the Earth Leviathan, the Bracken, the Coilheads, the Forest Keeper, the Nutcracker, the Jester, the Ghost Girl, and the Masked. Specifically, the bodies of players that have been taken over. I didn't count the mask itself since it's an item and fairly easy to avoid. You don't pick it up, you don't get got by it. But once it does get you, it turns into an entity that is pretty dangerous, so the Masked. Next is Speed. In the F tier we have the Hydra Deer. I'm pretty sure it's the slowest moving monster in the game, but because of how big it is, that usually doesn't matter much when it blocks an escape route or traps you on a railing. Next up would be D tier, but there are none, so we can move on to C tier. This is where the Snaffly is, since it can be outrun fairly easily. Above that, in the B tier, we have the Hoarding Bug, the Bunker Spider, the Baboon Hawks, the Forest Keeper, the Nutcracker, the Ghost Girl, and the Masked. These guys are all here because they're either the same speed as the player or slightly faster, but not so fast that it's inescapable. Ones like the Ghost Girl are inescapable, but not solely because of their speed. The A tier has the Spore Lizards, the Thumpers, the Eyeless Dogs, the Earth Leviathan, the Bracken, and the Circuit Bees. These monsters are significantly faster than the player, and more often than not cannot be outrun. And finally, the only 2 left that occupy the S tier are the Coilheads, which move frighteningly quickly when not being looked at, and the Jester, which can gain speeds that make it impossible to escape, even if the Jester is in another room. We could put the Jester in a lower tier, but since its top speed is faster than the players can blink, I feel pretty comfortable putting it here. Next is the Weaponry tier. Any secondary ability that helps it hunt us down. In the F tier we have the Hoarding Bugs, Baboon Hawks, Forest Keeper, and Jester. All of these monsters rely on raw strength to kill you, or, like the Hoarding Bug, have no need to kill you unless cornered. Next is the D tier, which have the Thumpers, the Eyeless Dogs, the Bracken, and the Coilheads. Now, the difference between F and D might not be readily apparent, and to a degree it is a little vague, but the idea is that D-tiered monsters actually have a secondary ability, even if it is kinda terrible, while F tiers do not. The Thumpers have their rush attack, the Eyeless Dogs have their increased hearing, the Bracken has its silent stalking, and the Coilheads have their freezing mechanic. The argument could be made that the Jester should be a D-tier monster because of these rules, but I figure that its increasing speed is more connected to the primary way it kills, which is why it's a little lower. In the C tier we have the Spore Lizards. They're able to release a noxious gas that blinds the player, which would help them kill you if they chose to attack. In the B tier we have the Bunker Spider and the Earth Leviathan. The Bunker Spider for its cobwebs, since moving through them can alert it to your position pretty quickly, and the Earth Leviathan really just because of how random its movements are. Only very seasoned players will know what to look out for to avoid an Earth Leviathan, whereas the other monsters you can figure out as they happen. In the A tier we have the Hydra Deer, the Snaffly, the Circuit Bees, and the Nutcracker. These secondary abilities are close to being the most lethal of them in the circumstances surrounding them. The Hydra Deer is toxic to the touch, so there's practically no way to combat it. The Snaffly wraps itself around your face, slowly suffocating you to death, your only saving grace being a fellow player that manages to smack it off with a shovel. The Circuit Bees generate enough electricity to create arcs of lightning, and the Nutcracker literally just has a gun. A ranged weapon in these enclosed spaces is honestly the most unfair weapon you could have. Not to mention that simply being kicked by it will one-shot you, so it really is a force to be reckoned with. And the last 2 monsters that take up spots in S tier are the Ghost Girl, since she can't be seen, heard, or interacted with by other players when she's attached herself to you, and the Masked, for their ability to replicate. For as many players there are, that's how many masks there can be. Once you've been caught by one, there's no way out. Now we have Aggression. as in how relentless it becomes once it sees you. This also extends to how far it can spot you from as well. In F tier we have the Spore Lizard. Since these monsters only attack if cornered, their aggression is extremely low. So long as you keep to your own, they won't pose a problem. Next to D tier, Hoarding Bugs and Circuit Bees. Hoarding Bugs are also pretty docile, but it's a little easier to antagonize them, since taking the things they collect or getting too close will trigger them. Your safety is not always guaranteed when around a Hoarding Bug. As for the Circuit Bees, they're extremely territorial, and will leave you alone if unprovoked. Next is C tier, the only occupant being the Hygrodere. Now, if not for one specific aspect, this monster would probably be a B or A tier for sure, and that's the fact that it can be placated. By placing a boombox next to it, it will start dancing to the music and stop its pursuit of whoever it was chasing. Because of that, it can be considered somewhat docile, which is why it's been labelled a C tier. B tier has the most monsters with the Snaffly, the Thumper, the Baboon Hawk, the Coilheads, the Nutcrackers, and the Masked. These are simply monsters that will attack you as they see you. Not much elaboration needed there. Now I did have a hard time with justifying the Masked here, since it's one of the few monsters that can leave the indoor area and follow players outside. But I decided to put it here since its searching mechanic is basically the same as the others, whereas monsters like the Ghost Girl or the Jester always know where the players are. In A tier we have the Bunker Spider, the Earth Leviathan, the Bracken, and the Forest Keeper. Now most of these will attack you on sight as well, but they're able to sense you from a much greater distance. Most monsters here, like the Bunker Spider, will spot you before you spot it, making it harder to avoid. Most can be avoided though by getting as far away from it as you can, as the Forest Keeper for example will stop chasing if it loses sight of you by hiding behind a tree or something. And finally in S tier we have the Eyeless Dog, the Jester, and the Ghost Girl. Each at the same level of aggression, but applied in completely different ways. The Eyeless Dog isn't necessarily relentless, but as soon as you get its very specialized attention, it's extremely hard to escape from. They can hear you from a massive distance, and by the time they get to you, running from them isn't really an option since they can still hear you. Your only choice is to quietly crawl away, but with something like that on your tail, it's hard to pull off on a whim. The Jester is here because it can track players throughout the entire indoor section. You don't run from the Jester, you could only try to escape outside. Once it's popped out, the entire map is fair game. It knows where you are at all times and will slowly gain speed to kill each player from one side of the map to the other. It's actually quite frightening to think about. And the last is the Ghost Girl. You thought you were safe even if you went outside? Nope. If there were an SS tier in this list, Ghost Girl would be there. You don't even avoid her. Once she spawns in, she already knows where everyone is. So once you've been targeted by her, your only chance to escape is to leave the moon itself. And the final tier list is intelligence, how effective it is at outsmarting you. That means traps, gimmicks, or whatever it has at its disposal to lure you in and kill you without being able to fight against it. In the F tier we have the Spore Lizard, Hoarding Bugs, Hygrodere, Thumper, Coilheads, Circuit Bees, and Forest Keepers. These monsters don't trap you, they just chase, if that, so they're low on the list. In the D tier we have the Eyeless Dogs, the Earth Leviathan, the Nutcracker, and the Jester. While these monsters are somewhat easy to outsmart or avoid, it'll only work for a while. The longer you mess around with them, the lower your chances get of surviving. Without any monsters in C, we move on to B, where the Baboon Hawks and Bracken are. The Baboon Hawks hunt in packs, so you're never only facing one at a time. This group mentality makes them much harder to fight off. The Bracken is easy to avoid only if you're with someone else to watch your back. If you're alone, you could easily be taken out by a Bracken, and even then, if you and your friends see one, you really only have a few seconds to get out. In the A tier, we have the Bunker Spider, the Snaffly, and the Masked. These monsters are designed to trick you. The Bunker Spider will wait in hiding after webbing up one of your friends, only to attack you when you get too close. The Snaffly hides above you, dropping down in your face when you least expect it, and the Masked are near indistinguishable from other players. Met in a dark room, or with no knowledge of what the Masked are, your death is nothing but guaranteed. And finally, taking the S tier spot again is the Ghost Girl, since it cannot be avoided. Once you're targeted, you're done for. And that's the entire tier list. So, after adding up all the scores from strength, speed, weaponry, aggression, and intelligence, what is our final score? Drum roll please. With grade F we have the roaming locusts and manticoes. Well, we already knew this, they were disqualified earlier in the video for being non-lethal. Next up are the grade Ds. We have the hoarding bug and the hydra dev, both easy to avoid and don't pose much of a problem. If they catch you at a bad time though, they can still get you, so don't let your guard down. With grade C we have the spore lizard, the snare flea, the thumpers, the baboon hawks, the coil heads, circuit bees and the forest keepers. While not the most lethal monsters, they too can pose a problem. It wouldn't be surprising to anyone if you didn't survive an encounter with most of these. The spore lizard and circuit bees definitely feel like the odd ones out, but if you screw around with either, they could become just as dangerous. With grade B, we have bunker spiders, eyeless dogs, earth leviathan, the bracken, nutcrackers and the jester. All monsters that are extremely good at killing players, and that people would laugh at you for having faced with how scary they are. Beaten only by the grade A monsters, the Ghost Girl and the Mast. Dubbed the most lethal company you'll find in Lethal Company. Mindfork's seal of approval. As you'd expect, I kind of agree with the tier list. I mean, I should, I'm the one that made it, but I had doubts, especially since this was more objective and numerically based. But there are some things that jump out to me, especially considering the two S tier monsters, since the Ghost Girl and the Masked can and will follow you all the way back out to your ship. So the idea that you can only truly escape these monsters by leaving the moon itself should speak for their lethality. There are definitely some that are a little odd, like the Jester being in tier B, even though it's one of the scariest monsters to encounter, and it's pretty hard to escape if not prepared or lucky, or like I mentioned before, the spore lizard and circuit bees being in the same category as the coil heads and forest keepers. But anyway, if you disagree with my tier list, let me know in the comments below how you would have done it. I'd love to know about the things I didn't consider. And who knows, maybe when Lethal Company gets a handful more monsters, we can do an overhaul and try again. Or maybe I'll create a survival guide and add these into it, who knows. Anyway, that's all from me. Like the video if you fancy, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.